I determine how many patients I see. I determine what the goals are. I like being my own boss.
I know a lot of PAs and NPs are curious about owning their own practice. Today, I'm joined by a PA who has owned her own practice for many years. She's going to give us a high-level overview of the ins and outs of owning your own practice as a PA. Please help me welcome Kris Pyles-Sweet. Welcome, Kris. I am so thankful that you have decided to speak with us and that you are willing to share the knowledge that you have gained. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about your PA career?
Well, I've been a PA for over 20 years, well, probably over 22 years now. My focus has always been on indigent health, free clinics, rural health. I did military medicine for years.
Tell us a little bit about why you ended up opening your own practice and how long ago was that?
We started probably back in 2016, but don't quote me on that. My years always get intermingled with each other. But I saw a position doing house calls. I called because I was very curious and I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact of going through a clinic versus doing house calls.
Right.
Ended up taking the job, and I realized I was the only provider doing anything. I was making phone calls, I was doing the billing, literally everything. So when my husband and I discussed this, said, this cannot be that hard.
Right.
We decided to open a house call practice.
When you decided to branch out on your own and start your own practice, what were the biggest, do you remember kind of what the biggest hurdles were for you at that time?
The biggest hurdles were deciphering what the state laws were for PAs. We were in Texas at the time, and they were a little different than the other states I had worked in. Other states were a lot more lenient in a lot of ways. And there were a few things that we had to just maneuver through, making sure that we were on target and doing the right thing. I like to follow the rules, especially as an owner.
I've not really looked into it closely, but isn't one of the big hurdles in Texas, and I think in some other states, is like the percentage of ownership that you can have in a practice? Is that correct? Or?
Correct. But there are ways around it. So PAs can own their own practice. I helped several PAs start a practice in Texas, and they're the sole owners.
Do you just go to an attorney to figure that out?
We had our accountant actually do some of the work for us.
Okay.
I have found that a lot of the attorneys, they don't really understand what we do. So what I've always suggested people do is to do all the footwork yourself, get everything done. If your accountant's willing to file and get everything done for you, take it to the attorney on a silver platter. Say, we just need some tweaks.
Okay.
And that's been helpful.
Were you doing advertising, or how did you find patients?
So we did Medicare only house calls. So that meant they had home health agencies. They had home health nurses going in. They needed someone to do the exam and then have a physician sign off on their plan of care. Okay. So it was kind of, the home healths already knew me from the previous practice. So when I just called them and said, we're opening our own, and the other one is now defunct because I was the only person there. Right. It was a natural.
And so on the Medicare exams, you said that it'd have a physician sign off. So are PAs allowed to sign off on those as well? Or did you have to have a supervising physician sign off on those?
The only thing that was required for the physician to sign off on was the plan of care. Okay. That has since changed.
Oh, okay.
Past year or two with the advocacy efforts through the AAPA. But it's called a 485, and it has what exactly the nurses are going to be doing and what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. He had to sign that every single month and every time.
Was that a difficult process to find a supervising physician?
What I did was I made a lot of contacts. I called the physicians and the other PAs that I knew in the area, asked who they were using, and then I just kind of worked out the process that way. A lot of networking, but we ended up finding someone through another physician that I had worked with previously in
Okay.
Texas.
I mean, I'm not going to ask you like how much you paid the physician, but just to give people an idea, like, is there a ballpark you give us, or like a percentage of your practice intake? How much?
Never, ever give a percentage. Never.
Okay.
It's your baby, your blood, sweat, and tears. Never give them a percentage. And look at it this way: they never give you a percentage as a PA when you're working for them, and they're going to be working for you. So anywhere between 500 to 2,000 a month is the going rate. There are some places, some PAs and nurse practitioners that are paying way more, and it's not worth it, especially if they're not going to be on site, if you don't call them all the time. It's just a stipend, a monthly stipend.
You were working with exclusively Medicare patients. Was that a choice because Medicare is easier to work with than maybe, private insurance companies, or did you just like that population?
I felt it was a niche in an underserved population. Remember, my background's in indigent care, free clinics, rural health. So it really fit right into my niche.
I do think that that's a population that needs house calls. I mean, it's so hard for so many of them to get out. So many of them don't drive. They have vision problems, they're caregiver to a sick spouse, and hard for them to leave. So I do think that that's a great niche to be in. You had that practice in Texas, but I know you're in North Carolina now. Did you open a new practice in North Carolina? Do you have both practices? Are you just down to one now?
We sold the practice in Texas, unfortunately. It was all my blood, sweat, and tears. I loved that job, but we wanted to get back to North Carolina. Came back to North Carolina, started looking for a position. All in the back of my mind, I was probably going to open another one. Looked for a position. I couldn't even get an interview. It was kind of weird. There were more nurse practitioner jobs available than there were PA positions, and quite frankly, disappointing. So I said, I've done this before. I'll do it again. Ended up opening a practice.
Are you in an on-site clinic now, or are you still doing house calls?
It is an on-site clinic. It's general medicine mixed with some aesthetics. My background's in endocrine and dermatology.
Which do you think you like better? House calls where you're going to people's houses, or do you like being in a clinic and people come to you?
That's a tough question. Something about going into their home, you are just on a different playing field. You're a guest in their home and they welcome you and you feel part of the family sometimes.
Right.
Versus being in a clinic where you see them come in and then they leave.
Right.
That's hard.
Yeah. And honestly, there's so much that I think that you can give better care in the home because you actually see what their living situation is and what their challenges are.
You can find out when their pill bottle isn't empty, that they've not been taking their medication. You don't find that stuff out in the clinic. Everybody wants to put on a good face when they come in the clinic.
Or what are your favorite things about owning your own practice?
Just the benefit of feeling like I'm in control, if you will. I determine how many patients I see. I determine what the goals are. I like being my own boss. I don't think I could ever go back to being an employee. I worked 1099 for years, love it. But being an employee, I think you're beholden. There's nothing wrong with it, but you're beholden. And once you get that taste of freedom, if you will, it's really hard to go back.
Just to give people an idea, like when you talk about the joys of owning your own practice, like you can see how many patients you want to see, but because you are the practice, I assume that you don't have to see as many patients to make the same amount of money, or is it about equal, or do you actually have to see more patients to make the same amount of money?
I make more money now. I make more money. I do not accept insurance at this time. Oversight Medicare kind of burned me out.
Is it a
DPC?
Yeah, direct,
like a membership?
Yeah.
No, I have looked into that. I'm just a one-woman show at this point, but that is my goal.
So if you don't take insurance and you're not having a membership, people are just they're paying cash for their office visits?
Yes.
I don't know what to ask about that. It just surprises me that people would do that, I guess.
You'd be surprised how many people do not have insurance.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They need to be seen.
So what are the downsides of owning your own practice? Or more specifically, what are the really tough things that people need to think about that they may not think about when they want to open their own practice?
Ooh, first of all, you're not going to be making money right away. You've got a lot of output. I put mine together piece by piece. I did a lot of searching on the internet, like Marketplace, to get that. Those are the things that a lot of people, when they call and say, how do I start my own practice? They don't realize that they've got to find a place. They got to make sure that it's within the city regulations with parking spots. Is it handicap accessible? What are you going to be able to offer with what you have? Are you going to offer labs off-site? If not, where are you going to put the lab? So many things, so many things.
Right. I assume you probably do some general point of care labs, or do you not, or do you do any labs on site?
I do labs.
So you have an arrangement with a lab somewhere that you've
Correct.
drawing
Yes.
and sending for?
And a lot of lab companies will just come by and pick up your stuff.
Right. Just like any regular practice we've worked in that doesn't have their own on-site lab. Yeah. Okay. So because you're not running the labs there, you don't have to have any kind of other special.
So I do have a CLIA, which is the laboratory certification.
Right.
For COVID, strep throat, pregnancy, UAs, just the normal stuff that you would have in a regular clinic without getting into too much detail.
Right. Yeah. Just a quick point of care. Okay. Is that terribly difficult to get?
It's paperwork. It's paperwork. And you do have to have your supervising collaborative physician sign the paperwork for you.
So you're not taking insurance at this time, but do you know of PAs that have their own practice that are taking insurance? Do you know if that's something that's difficult to get lined up?
It's tedious and it's a lot of paperwork, but PAs are doing it.
Is there anything where you have to do anything special with like the medical board or anything? Is that who you're turning paperwork into? I know so little about this. I don't know how to ask that question, but does the state medical board come into play in this when you're setting up your practice or finding out about setting up your practice?
All states are different. In North Carolina, I had to apply for a medical practice license, if you will, on top of my typical PA license.
Okay. And then I assume you have to make sure also that you have all of the regular business licenses that the city or county that you live in require as well. Yeah. And state. Was there any kind of resources that you were able to lean on that kind of has a lot of that stuff together already? Or was it just you doing a lot of digging and finding? I
did a lot of digging. Everything was my own. I didn't even know. Well, again, I was discouraged from many people because I was APA to do this, but I knew people who weren't medical that were owning practices, and I thought, I'm pretty smart. I just need to figure out what it is.
So anything different about malpractice insurance? Are companies that you talk to or the company you end up going with, do they know about this? Do they understand about PAs owning their own practice, or was that difficult to find somebody that would insure you?
I use CMF, which is endorsed by the AAPA. I was up for renewal, so I went and looked at a couple companies, ended up going with CMF again, because they seemed to understand what was going on, and they didn't give me much grief as the other company, like, you do what? You own we'll have to take this to the board. But no, and just to reiterate, when I renewed it, I said, now, I own my own practice. Yes, we know that. Now, that is different from, you do need to get, I have equipment insurance and insurance in case somebody falls on my landlord's property, things like that you probably, I never thought about before.
Yeah.
That is something you have to do.
Yeah, those are general, any business you open, to look at those kind of insurances. But so for the malpractice insurance, are you saying that it didn't really change much from whether you're practicing in somebody else's practice or practicing in your own as far as the cost?
I'm not sure about that. I've heard people pay anywhere from 3 to 10 a year. So I don't know.
Okay. So you talked about one of the great things about owning your own practice is setting the number of patients that you see a day, kind of setting your own schedule. Do you find that now that you are your boss, your own boss, that you're spending more time with patients, or does it seem to
Oh,
now to be about the
yes.
same?
I'm spending a lot more time with patients with each visit.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that PAs and all providers right now are probably frustrated with when you're working as an employee, is that feeling like you're on that, you're being whipped from behind, like, see, go
Yes.
faster, see more. So what do you do when you have questions that you want to consult with, like a specialist, or just want to bounce things off of another provider?
I have a lot of people I can refer to, specifically PAs. If I have a question that I feel is above and beyond, I have no problem. I do not hesitate to reach out to a specialist. Just tell them who I am and what I've got going on. Just the same in any other practice.
In either of the businesses that you had, did you hire other employees? Do you have any other like front desk staff or receptionists or anything like that? Or do you do it all yourself?
Well, we started out ourselves in Texas. By the time we sold it, we had 6 providers, over 2,000 charts,
Wow.
and two office staff, and they were excellent. It's the only way that we could have gotten anything done with all the regulations that had to be done for Medicare. In this practice, I just recently hired someone else,
Okay.
because I needed a break.
And so when you hire like a provider come in, you just agree on it and you're just doing it like an hourly rate, or?
So I don't have a provider yet here.
Okay.
In Texas, we did a 1099.
Oh, okay.
That way they were in charge of how much money they made. And that's the way I liked it. It gave them their own practice, mini practice, if you will.
Thank you so much, Kris, for sharing that information with us. This obviously was a very high-level overview and just really kind of letting PAs know and realize that there are other PAs out there that own their own practices. Any final thoughts or words of encouragement that you'd like to give PAs who are thinking about opening their own practice?
Do it. It may seem overwhelming, like a tall mountain, but it's so worth it. The feedback that you get and the sense of accomplishment is incredible. I think anybody can do it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. If you are looking for other ideas of things to do in medicine, if you want to try different specialties, or if you're looking for those really cool and unique jobs that are available, then click on these videos here, go to my main page of my channel, and you'll see lots of different opportunities that you can look into. I wish you all the best. Thanks for joining us. Take care, and I'll see you next time on the Medicine Couch. Bye.